These women offer experiences about their journey and share advice about skills, values, and characteristics that women uniquely bring to leadership. As you just heard, this evening is being recorded. Before introducing our program, I want to thank Lyd Needler and Shireen Tafik, the co-chairs of Outreach and Events Committee, and Tristina Kanka, the producer and director of tonight's event. A particular thank you to you, Tristina. After the questions and answers, we are reserving about 20 minutes for questions you might have for Carrie. Please put them in the chat bar for Tristina to ask Carrie a little later. I now want to introduce Carrie Hessler-Radelet, our featured extraordinary woman, and Marianne Minatello, who will be asking questions. Carrie Hessler-Radelet is President and CEO of Global Communications, a global nonprofit that brings together local ingenuity and global insights to save lives, advance equity, and secure strong futures. Many of us know her as the former deputy director and then the 19th director of the Peace Corps, serving all 8 years of the Obama administration. During these 8 years, she focused her leadership on the empowerment of women and girls, founded the Peace Corps program Let Girls Learn, and championed training and expanded support systems both within each country and in Washington for Peace Corps volunteers harassed and sexually assaulted. She also strengthened Peace Corps programming that valued and supported communities' own interventions for growth and development. This emphasis on local groups' own intervention remains a core value to her and her leadership with global communities. As she told me earlier, this value is dependent on relationships of trust in building partnerships, a driving passion for her work. Carrie began her international experience as a Peace Corps volunteer with her husband, Steve, in Western Samoa. After receiving a master's degree in public health at Harvard, she focused her professional career on HIV/AIDS through the PEPFAR program and international maternal and child health with John Snow Incorporated, becoming vice president and director of the Washington office. Quite a career. To me, Carrie is a strong friend and mentor. Her Peace Corps leadership values eased. Her leadership, the values, and all that she did as Peace Corps director eased my own path, following her as successor as Peace Corps director. Now let me turn a moment to Marianne Minatello. Marianne was a founding member of Women of Peace Corps Legacy, country director in Bolivia, chief of operations Inter-America region, senior advisor to Carrie, and to 5 other Peace Corps directors, to each of whom she has given advice, trust, and friendship. Her advice to leaders is given with a smile and fresh tea. It's made all of our work as Peace Corps directors possible. With that, Marianne, I'm now going to turn it to you to begin the discussion with Carrie. Welcome again, everyone.
Thank you, Jody. Thank you, Jody. And thank you, Carrie, for being with us this evening. It really is a pleasure. It's an honor. It's just wonderful to be talking with you again, even though it's virtual, not face-to-face, but it's wonderful. Carrie, I'd like to talk first about your early life, your early adult life and influences. We know that you were a volunteer in Samoa, and I think you went there in your early 20s with your husband. You had some idea about Peace Corps already. Your aunt was a Peace Corps volunteer in Turkey, then a country director in Thailand. So that wasn't new to you. But I think that when you got to Samoa, life, your expectations may have changed a bit. Could you tell us a little bit about that early experience and how it influenced you in your later life?
Sure. Thank you so much, Marianne. And thank you, Jody. I just want to start with a few words of thanks. First of all, thanks to Tristina for that Samoan intro music. That was lovely and really brought me home to my Peace Corps experience. Jody, I have known Jody for nearly 40 years, 35 or 6 actually, because when Jody was a regional director in Peace Corps, she came to visit my site and actually stayed overnight at our home. And so I have known Jody for a very long time, and she has been a role model and a friend, and it's a privilege to be here. And then there's Marianne, who was by my side every single day when I was at Peace Corps. I could not have done my job without Marianne, and many others who are on this call today too, who were there during my leadership of Peace Corps and on whom I depended on an almost daily basis. So it's too many to name, and I'm not going to even try, but I just want to say a special thank you to Marianne and Jody. Yeah, so Steve and I, my husband Steve and I, were Peace Corps volunteers in Samoa, and I did have the benefit of several members of my family had already been in Peace Corps. My grandparents also served in Peace Corps in the early 1970s. After they retired, they served in Malaysia, and they worked as university professors. So by the time I got into Peace Corps, we were actually, I was actually the first 3-generation Peace Corps volunteer. And so Peace Corps has been part of my DNA for a long time. But, I have to say I was very surprised by the impact it had on my life. And I would like to share a story because it has profoundly influenced the way I approach my work and even the way I relate to human beings. And so I'd love to share the story of my host mother, Losa, and her husband, Vianney. So I arrived in Samoa. I was 24 years old. And, as Peace Corps volunteers, we were given host families, and my host family was Losa and Vianney. Now, I was 24 and Losa was 32, but she already had 8 children. She was 8 years older than me, and she already had 8 children. She had started her reproductive life at age 15. And she was so intrigued how I could have been married for a year and not had any children. But anyway, that's a different story. I was a teacher. I taught at an all-girls Catholic school. And one day I came home from school and Losa was sobbing deep, deep tears. I mean, she was crying so hard she could barely talk. And it took about 5 minutes to calm her down. And I really thought that someone had died. And it turned out that the reason for her tears was that she had just discovered that she was pregnant again with her 9th child. And she did not know how she was going to survive the pregnancy and be able to feed another child because they were subsistence farmers. She worked, her day began at 4 a.m. and didn't stop until she fell into bed at about 10 p.m. She was exhausted and could not imagine how she was going to be able to manage this pregnancy and a newborn baby. And for me, it was such a big shock because I had always had the privilege of associating birth with great joy. And so I just was so taken by that. And then we started talking and I said to her, well, Losa, where are you going to deliver your baby? And she said, well, right here on the floor of my house, assisted by my mother-in-law, Margarita. That's where all my babies have been born. And I knew from Peace Corps, because I'd had to do a map of the village, that there was a very nice clinic, a brand new clinic, not very far away on a paved road, and that there was a midwife who was at that clinic. And I knew nothing about pregnancy, but I did know that when you deliver a baby, it's good to have prenatal care. So my one piece of this was that I asked Losa to accompany me to the health clinic to just say hello to the midwife, and Losa agreed to do that. And we went there. And the midwife took one look at her and she said, you're highly anemic. You're going to need to take these iron tablets. You have a very high risk pregnancy because your last child was only born 14 months ago and you've had 8 children in rapid succession. And you need to deliver your baby in this health facility. And I was watching Losa and I could see her face just fall because she knew that her husband would never permit her to have a baby in the health facility, because Samoan babies were born at home, where they were the first people who welcomed them were the faces of those they love and who love them. And that makes a lot of sense, actually, if you think about it. But anyway, we went home, and the midwife actually accompanied us to the house. She walked back up the hill. We lived up a hill, and she walked up the hill with us, and she spent some time with us. And that became the pattern. She scheduled Losa every month on the very last visit of the day, and then she walked up the hill with us and spent about an hour or 2 hours, getting to know the family, drinking tea, having a meal, maybe talking about, soccer or rugby or politics or the neighbors or whatever, anything except for health. Building relationships of trust. And she didn't say anything about Losa's health until about the 8th month, where she finally said to Vianney, Losa's husband, and Margarita, the mother-in-law, because mothers-in-law have a lot to say about where their daughters-in-law deliver their baby. She said, I think it's critically important that Losa delivers her baby in the health facility. And Margarita, I would welcome you to join me down there. In fact, you can be the one to deliver the baby, but we need Losa. Losa needs to be in a place where she can get medical care if she needs it. And because she had taken the time, she had spent hours and hours with Losa and her family, they agreed. And she was actually one of the first women in the village to deliver her baby in this new clinic. So on the day that Losa gave birth, we rushed her down to the health facility. Sweet little baby Margarita, named after her grandmother, was born almost immediately. It was her 9th child after all. And then about 5 minutes later, Losa went into postpartum hemorrhage. She would have died if she had delivered her baby on the floor of her home. But she didn't die because she was surrounded by a trained healthcare provider. She had access to blood. They had medicine. They had an ambulance, within a phone call away. And Losa's life was saved, and baby Margarita's life was saved. But what that taught me is that by any health standards, Losa had excellent access to care. She was less than a mile on a paved road with a trained provider, with a facility that was fully stocked with everything she needed. But there were so many barriers, so many cultural barriers to her accessing the care that she needed. And the only reason that this story has a happy ending is because that midwife took the time to understand Losa's life and build a relationship of trust with the people who were the decision makers, the key stakeholders in this case. And she eventually was able to persuade them to do the activity, the action that caused Losa's life to be saved. I learned so many leadership lessons from watching that midwife in action throughout that, 9-month period of time or 8-month period of time that I spent with them. And it was my driving passion. I went, as you heard from my bio, I went to School of Public Health. I majored in maternal and child health and really dedicated my life to moms and babies. And it's been a huge privilege. But that midwife, she taught me almost every important lesson I've ever learned.
Carrie, what a wonderful story.
Yeah.
Truly wonderful story. And I'm sure that today, these many years later, you think back on that story,
Yeah,
and the lessons that you learned. We're going to hear a little bit more, I hope, about those lessons and the trust that was developed between the midwife and the family.
yeah.
You've said how you've dedicated your life, your graduate experience to maternal and child care.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that runs through your whole career.
Mm-hmm.
But then you expanded that when you became first deputy director and then director of Peace Corps, an iconic agency. The duties, the responsibilities were far broader than the mental health in which you had such expertise and experience. Can you speak to some of the challenges that you had in moving from your area of expertise, where I think you must have felt comfortable, to this wider responsibility or range of responsibilities as the director?
Yes, excellent question. I could have never predicted that I would have ended up as, deputy director and then director of the Peace Corps. It was not ever in my frame of reference. I was very happy. I worked at JSI. I had a career that I loved. And then out of the blue one day, I got a phone call. It was from Harris Wofford asking me if I was interested in a leadership position in the Peace Corps. And I have to say, I debated it because I knew it would take me away from public health, and I loved public health, and I was comfortable in public health. But then I thought, my gosh, what an opportunity. I'll never have an opportunity like this again. And so I decided to do it. And it's changed my life entirely. I'm so glad that I said yes. But it was scary. I will tell you that I was terrified going there. There were so many things that were different. I was going from really being a subject matter expert in public health to a government agency that had been a long time since I was a volunteer. Even Peace Corps had changed a lot since I was there. Of course, I was familiar with Peace Corps, but Peace Corps had changed quite a lot. I had never worked in government. I had worked in the for-profit and nonprofit sector, but never before in government. I went from knowing public health programming to a whole range of development sector, sectoral interventions, which I actually really love, because I actually now believe that public health, only can exist within, there are many influences on public health, and a lot of them have to do with the other areas that Peace Corps really introduced me to, youth development and agriculture and community economic development, environment. So many of those things have impact on health too, even though health remains my profession, I would say, in some ways. Peace Corps introduced me to so many other disciplines. I have to say, the whole idea of representing a government agency, so working with the White House, working with other US government agencies, working with Congress, that was particularly terrifying, I would say. And working before, my unit of analysis had been program participants, so people, moms, and babies in my programs, and now I was working with volunteers. I could not have done any of that without your help, Marianne, and really and truly the staff of Peace Corps. Peace Corps has extraordinary staff people because it draws mainly from its volunteer base, but also other talented individuals as well. And we had an extraordinary team, and really, it takes a village, like we know. But I loved my time at Peace Corps. I learned so much. It really was the pivotal experience of my life, and the highest privilege. I feel really fortunate to have worked under the Obamas, because they truly loved the Peace Corps and were champions for what Peace Corps represents. And I had the opportunity to work closely with Michelle Obama, but even President Obama I would see on an almost quarterly basis. And it was such a privilege to know that our agency was serving a cause that was important to the highest office in our nation. So that was really a privilege. And the other thing that I loved is I loved the fact that we were changing lives. The volunteers' lives were being transformed, even as they were also, working hand in hand with communities around the world to bring change as well. And so just the personal transformation that comes from building relationships of trust. What a privilege to be able to work with an organization that supports that at such a high level. So I loved every minute of it.
So did I, Carrie. Just an aside. But Carrie, I've heard you use the word trust a couple of times, and I'd like to focus on that a little and ask if you can give. I know you talked about the trust developed when the midwife got to know the family. That you had great teams with the places that you worked. How does trust show itself, and how do you, as a leader, lead in the establishment and nourishment of a trusting relationship. Can you give us some examples? I think people want to hear that.
Sure, sure. I mean, I do think, I mean, how do you build trust? I mean, trust sort of comes from, trust is earned for one thing. Trust comes from credibility, but I also think trust comes from knowing someone, or at least knowing enough about them to be able to trust them through their repeat behaviors. But I really actually do believe that personal relationships are key. And that it comes from believing that you will have the best interests, you know, their best interests at heart. I also think about, you know, I talk a lot about building relationships of trust, and I'd love to give you an example, actually. I really think that if you think in your own lives about who in your world have you trusted, and who have you gone to advice, you know, to for advice, it's generally someone who you know and whose advice you trust. So I'm just going to give one story. There are thousands of stories like this, but this is one of my favorite stories. I went to Kyrgyzstan when I was there, and I met a woman named Idai. And she told me that when she was a young girl, she had a teacher who was a Peace Corps volunteer named Nicole. And Nicole was a math teacher, and I think she also taught biology. And Nicole's part in the story was that she noticed that Idai was a particularly good student, that she was a natural leader, that she was someone that other students came to. And Nicole said to Idai one day, Nicole, what do you want to be when you, Idai, what do you want to be when you grow up? And Idai said, the question stunned her because no one had ever asked her in her entire life what she wanted to be, because as far as she knew, the only possibility for her was to be a mother and a farmer and a farmer's wife, like her mother and her grandmother and generations of women before her. It never occurred to her that there was any other option for her. And Nicole said to her, well, you know, Ida, you're so talented, and you're a natural leader, and you're good in science, and you're good in math. Have you ever considered something like medicine? You're so good with people. And Ida said, the idea of that completely shocked her. She said, how can I be a doctor? I'm from Talas, which is, you know, 11-hour bus ride from Bishkek, the capital. I'm a woman, you know, I have no money. I can't become a doctor. And Nicole said, you know, you can, because you're bright. And the next time that the Peace Corps director or the Peace Corps doctor came to visit Nicole introduced that doctor to Idai. And Idai started to begin about, maybe I could apply to medical school. Maybe I could be a doctor. And Nicole helped her, you know, send in her application. And sure enough, Idai was accepted as a medical student in the university. She got a scholarship. And today she is the nation's leading cardiologist. Now, what was Nicole's role in it? Nicole saw potential in Idai and sparked an idea and gave her a little bit of support. All of it, you know, the rest of it was all Idai. But that's what relationships of trust do. If she hadn't had a relationship, if she didn't care enough to reach out to Idai and say, I noticed something special in you, that would never have happened. And Idai would not be the extraordinary leader she is in her country today. The thing I loved, I visited her, she was in the Ministry of Health, that's how I know her. But she had a picture of herself and Nicole. She was a 15-year-old girl, and she had a picture of Nicole on her desk. And she says, I keep that picture on my desk to remind me of my responsibility to nurture the potential of other young girls. And I love that story. And to me, that speaks volumes about nurturing trust. It starts with a relationship. It starts with some understanding or feeling that you are valued by that person. And then it grows from there. It's organic. It can't be forced. It is entirely earned.
Thank you, Carrie. There's a lesson there for all of us, I think, and we appreciate it. Carrie, I'd like to turn now to looking at women and how you've assisted them in their careers. We have a number of people on this Zoom call. Many of them are interested in their careers and what you can do to help them. I know you've been a mentor to dozens, maybe hundreds of men and women throughout your career. And I'm interested in what you say to people at different stages, because not everyone is at the same stage in his or her career. First, let's talk about young professionals, the ones who are maybe in their first jobs, their first professional positions, maybe after Peace Corps, maybe not. And they're asking, should I go to graduate school? Or should I stay in this particular career path that I have begun? Or should I branch out? I'm really, I don't know where to go from here. I'm just starting out. That's a common question. And you've probably had some answers to it.
I don't know if I have any answers or not, but what I generally ask people is what brings you joy? And I usually ask them to think about what they're doing now and what part of their job or what part of their life brings them greatest joy, because you spend a lot of time at work. And I really feel that as much as we possibly can, we should pursue our passion, if we can. Now, not everyone has the privilege of being able to pursue their passion. The other thing I would say is when you are young, before you have other obligations, too many financial obligations or too many family obligations, that is the time when you can take risks. That's when you can try new things. It's not always going to work out, but it doesn't matter. You just try something else. I changed jobs every 2 years for probably the first 8 years of my career. And then I found something, my public health career, that I really, really loved. But that time when you're still young and you still are relatively unencumbered by responsibility, that is such a gift because it's a very short period of your life. And so what I often say to people is if you have an opportunity to have an adventure, to do some travel, to try a new career that you're not sure about, but the stakes are not that high, just go for it. But above all, make sure that it makes your heart sing as much as possible. Now, I do want to say that, some people don't actually have the privilege of being able to just do whatever they want, do whatever their heart sings. They may have family obligations or parents they need to take care of or siblings to help get through college and what have you. But even what I would say to them is just still try to find a passion, something in your life that can bring you passion. Maybe it's a hobby, maybe it's travel, maybe it's a new language, but something that brings you joy. Having joy in your life is so important.
Totally agree. And I think that is good advice or guidance for people at those early stages. You don't have to stay in the same path. I've often said to mentees, life and career are not a straight line. There are a lot of zigzags.
Totally. Absolutely.
Go with those zigzags. It's okay.
Yeah.
I'd like to now move a little bit to those mid-level or even senior professionals. They probably have graduate degrees, they've got a good deal of experience under their belts, and now they're looking at, okay, what next? Do I wait until I can get the big one, the CEO job, the director job? Or is it okay if I continue in what I'm doing? I'm kind of torn. How do you deal with that? I think those are real challenges for senior professionals as well.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, I have to say that I wrestled with the same thing when I left Peace Corps.
Yes.
It was like a crisis for me because I'd had this most amazing job,
Mhm.
and then all of a sudden I was unemployed along with 10,000 other people who were leaving government at the same time.
Right.
I had to figure out what it was I wanted to do. And I took some time to figure it out. I had the privilege of being able to take a little time. Not everyone does. Again, I think somewhere in your life, even, in the middle part of your life, you have more responsibilities generally. It's when you maybe have a family, maybe you're taking care of an older parent, maybe you have a responsibility to a partner. So often our decisions are not just our own. We have to consider all those things. But I do still think that there's an opportunity to step outside your comfort zone by, trying for a job that's a little beyond your reach. I mean, that's great. I do think it's important to try something fresh and stepping out of your comfort zone. Like they say, life begins at the end of your comfort zone. And then when you get really old, like me, you're supposed to like be doing a whole new set of things to keep your brain active, like learning languages or going scuba diving or something like that, reading a book a week or something. So, I mean, I do actually think that it's so important to be a lifelong learner. When I was sort of early mid-career, but I had children, I went overseas. I lived overseas for about 15 years, and I loved that. I really loved that time. I loved that time with my family. It definitely took me out of my comfort zone. I was doing different projects, and I loved that. But that middle part of your career is when you're most productive. It's when you're going to have more responsibility. And it's also when you are least able to just take off and do something wild and crazy. So, that's the time of your life where you kind of buckle down and you do your work. But if you can find some passion in that, that's the extra bonus.
Again, good advice, Carrie. I'm sure I'm going to ask this question about people who do interviews, of which I know you have done many, many. And often it's a board interviewing, not just one person. And I think I've heard you speak to this in the past. What do you, as a board member, not only in your current position, but in the history of your career, what do you think board members are looking for? I mean, they see in your resume the skills, the experience, the graduate degrees. What do you look for in a person that you're hiring at a high level?
That's a great question. I want someone who's going to push the limits a little bit, who's not going to just do the job, but is going to push a little farther. Who I also am looking for someone who I think is going to be able to work well with others, because you can be the smartest person in the world, but if you cannot work with others, you are not going to be a success. So, I mean, for me, emotional intelligence and just the ability to get along with others. And I ask for examples of that. I mean, tell me the hardest situation you've ever been in, describe it and what you did. Tell me about some time you failed and what you learned from it. I personally like to look for leaders who are willing to demonstrate some vulnerability or humility, because I think those are really important qualities. And sometimes I ask people if they're like really, really serious and I want to see if they have a sense of humor. I'll ask them to tell me a joke, which often completely stuns them.
I can imagine.
Yeah.
Carrie, you've mentioned family throughout this conversation, and I know that people in our audience, some of them, oops, there's the phone. My husband better answer it. I know people who have families or are thinking of having families wonder, how did you manage in your career with so many responsibilities? How did you manage career and family? It's a common question, but it's a real question. I mean,
no, it's a very important question. I mean, I have to say, the world has changed a lot, and I think now more than when my children were young. I mean, men and women are really partners in general, at least in our country. That was not as much the case when I started child rearing, although I am so fortunate to have had a husband who was really willing to not only be an equal co-parent, but was incredibly supportive of my career and made sacrifices for my career. So having a partner, if you possibly can, who can help you. Now, not everyone has a partner, so finding other people around you who can help you and support you while you have children, so you can, I think just someone to talk to about the woes at work is important writ large. I do think there's a time, especially if you have kids and the kids are in like junior high. I actually think that the time when kids need you most is when they're in junior high. It's when they don't want you around, but when you really have got to be there. That's when the bad stuff happens if you're not there. I actually took a couple of years off of my travel schedule. I just told my work I'm not traveling anymore. I mean, I'll work. I worked. I always worked throughout my career. But I did take a really about a 5-year period of time where I did not travel at all so that I could be home every night for my kids. I had the privilege of doing it because I had a boss that was supportive of me and was willing to help me find the right flex in my schedule so that I could work and then also the family. I also feel like it was easier, frankly, I'm just being honest here. I raised my kids until they were about 11 overseas. And that was a gift for our whole family. First of all, my kids grew up believing that the world was their oyster, and they felt very comfortable in different cultural settings, and they learned, several languages, and they could understand my work because they had been part of it. I used to take them with me on site visits and what have you. But it also, it was easier to work there. And so that was a strategy that I used when my children were younger. Not everyone has that privilege, though, I have to say.
Yeah, and also thank you for mentioning that junior high age. Those of us who have raised children, I think, know that it isn't just the infants.
Infants are infinitely easier than early teenagers.
And even late teenagers.
Even late teenagers, right.
But before we turn it over to questions, and I do want to make sure we have time for questions, there's something I'd like to ask you, because I've worked with you for several years, and I know you have what I would call a strong moral compass. Some people would call them guiding principles. I'd like you to share with us what those guiding principles are and how they have helped shape the decisions or the things you do and those you won't do.
Thank you. That is a really good question. Maybe the leading sort of guiding principle that I really tried to live my life by is honoring the dignity and common humanity of all people, like really being intentional about human dignity. And Marianne, you've heard me say this, and I've said this in a lot of speeches, but what I discovered through Peace Corps is that talent, intellect, motivation, and potential are equally distributed around the world, but opportunity is not. And so if you believe then that all human beings have this, the core intellect, motivation, they are very deserving of dignity and worthy of your time. And so just remembering that, especially when you're in a frustrating situation with an employee or a clerk at the store or whatever, just understanding that they have dignity that is theirs because they are human beings and they are worthy of the respect that accompanies that. That has been something I really try to remember all the time. I think along with that is just really a conscientious commitment to demonstrating humility. I am never the smartest person in the room, but as a CEO or as a director of the Peace Corps, what I can do is make sure that I am surrounded by other really smart people. And I have had so many colleagues who brought their talent and their intellect to the job. And having humility about my role, even if I have the title, is something that's been very important to me. And I think has helped me to be a leader that people can approach. Another thing is just hiring good people and letting them do your job, do their job, not micromanaging. And you hire for character and potential, not just job experience. And then once you hire them, let them do their job. I think as a boss, that's how my boss treated me. And that's what I've tried to do with others. A clear focus on the mission always. And at Peace Corps, that was so easy. And in global communities where I work now, it's also really easy just to really focus on the mission. And then because I came out of, I really consider myself a technocrat. I really was raised in the public health world that's based in evidence, is just making sure that the work we're doing is based on evidence. And also is based on the context, because every context is different. And so even though you might have a best practice, context is everything. And so understanding the importance of the context, the culture, the language, the indigenous wisdom, all of that is important. And then as a management, this is my last one, because I know I'm talking a lot. For me, a management principle has been pushing decisions down as close to the place where the impact of that decision will be felt. So that's sort of a commitment to not centralizing decision-making, but really intentionally trying to shift power, really addressing the power imbalances and shift power and decision-making and authority and as much as possible resources to the place where the decision will be felt, the impact of the decision will be felt. So I've tried to employ those basic principles in my work setting as a leader. These are moral principles or guiding principles that I developed by surrounding myself with really extraordinary human beings like yourself, like others who taught me these things.
Mhm. Well, thank you for that, Carrie, and thank you for your frank and motivating questions and answers, or answers to the questions. I know there are so many people in the audience who want to ask you some things, and I'm going to turn it over now to Tristina, who has been monitoring the chat box. And if you haven't put a question or comment into the chat box, I invite you to do so now. Tristina, are you there?
I'm here. Thank you. Carrie, that was really wonderful to hear stories from Samoa and then your time in Kyrgyzstan, and just brings me back to my service and what I learned from it too. So it's really wonderful to hear that. So there's a few questions in the chat. First off, looking back, would you have done anything differently in your career?
In my career, I don't think I would. I am one of these people. I am actually a person who makes a decision and I don't look back very much. And actually it's a gift. So I don't second guess. And I have felt that my career in my life has been so unbelievably blessed that I've been grateful. But I tell you, there is one decision that I regret very deeply. It's not a career decision. I had a very close friend in high school, and her husband passed away, and they held a memorial service on Easter. And I chose to not go to his memorial service and instead spend Easter with my family. And I've regretted that my whole life. So that's the only thing that I've regretted in my life. I've been enormously fortunate.
I love that you didn't look back.
Yeah, I don't look back. I don't know how many of you have watched Ted Lasso, but one of my favorite things from Ted Lasso is in the very first episode, he says, "What's the happiest animal on earth?" And the answer is a goldfish, because it has a 12-second memory.
I love that.
Yeah.
I sometimes wish I had my own more nerve to do that, and I think I'm learning as I get older to trust my instincts and to not look back. Thank you for your answer. Another person asks, what advice do you give to the current Peace Corps directors, Carol Spahn, in reopening after the evacuation?
It's so interesting. I actually was down at Peace Corps today for the first time. I had never been at the new Peace Corps office ever since I left Peace Corps, because I just haven't had an occasion to. But and Carol's a good friend. I hired Carol actually a long time ago to be a country director in Malawi, and I always thought she was an extraordinary leader. She is in an uncomfortable place because she's waiting for confirmation. She'll be an excellent Peace Corps director when she gets through, but the confirmation process is really, grueling and completely out of your control. And it has nothing to do with you, and it has nothing to do with Peace Corps. It has everything to do with whether or not some senator has a hold on you. And what is the calendar for actually for clearing nominations, because your confirmations are done in groups, large groups generally. They'll do 25 at a time or something. And right now as we all know, elections are next week, so it's unlikely she's going to be confirmed until well after the midterm elections, and quite possibly not until after January, when the new Congress takes up. But what I would say to her is just continue to focus on the mission, kind of some of the things I was talking about before, focus on the things that matter right now. You cannot control confirmation, and it will happen when you least expect it. So control the things you can control, and that's the work of the agency. It's tough. It's a tough time for Peace Corps now because our best recruiters are current volunteers and the networks they have and the stories they tell. And we don't have that, and we've been without volunteers now for a very long time, and they're starting up. But you know, our Peace Corps staff are incredibly resilient, and we have a great message. We have such an important role to play in the world. And just my advice to her would be focus on the things that matter and carry on, and don't get sidetracked by the things you can't control.
Great advice. Another thing I'm working on. Okay, and then we have another question here. So what's next, and what's will be your next chapter?
You know, I just became CEO of my organization. After I left Peace Corps, I joined an organization called PCI, and then 2 years ago we merged. PCI and Global Communities merged. So I just became president and CEO of that merged organization. So that's sort of a new chapter, and that only happened 3 weeks ago. I'll do this for a few more years, and then my next chapter is going to be not so much work. I'm going to enjoy time. I'll probably do consulting work or something. Maybe I'll teach a class if someone will have me. But I'm looking forward to actually not working full time and, you know, doing some hiking. And I love to be outside. My kids both live in Denver. I'd love to spend more time there. This is my last formal job. Of that, I am quite certain. And I'm excited about this job that I'm doing now and all the possibilities it presents. And my next job will be enjoy my husband and my family and the world around me. And I'll probably do some, I will most certainly volunteer and, you know, do things in my community. There's a lot of volunteer work that I haven't been able to do because the pace of my work has been so quick, and it also has involved so much travel. My entire career has been travel. And so I would love to be able to do a regular stint at a women's shelter, for example, or a food bank, or, you know, read to children. You know, I long to do regular volunteer work, and I've never been able to do that. So that's probably what my next chapter looks like.
Well, that sounds lovely. And I'm from Colorado, so go Denver.
Yeah, beautiful there.
It is beautiful. Let's see what other questions we have here. Any other recommendations for women in the Foreign Service where there's a, you know, where it's, you know, it tends to be more male dominated, but things are slowly changing.
It is slowly changing. It is changing, but it never changes fast enough. You know, I have to say that there is still so much, you know, so much discrimination against women, and it's veiled in many places, and it's so frustrating. And I think that it still exists in places like our own government. I think we have to speak out about it. I think, you know, we need to not be silent. Say, you know, I grew up in the HIV/AIDS world, and silence equals death was one of our very early on statements. And I do think that the reason, and I think we see this in Black Lives Matter and many of the other social movements that have gained traction, is they gain traction because someone spoke up. So I think that we ourselves speak up, and we help others to speak up as well. And there's strength in numbers too. If you can get more than just you, but others to speak up when there are, you know, situations that are really not acceptable, I think that's important. And the Foreign Service is a wonderful career. And like anywhere, it's all about getting the right people around you. So if you have an assignment where you're surrounded by people you love and really want to work with, that's a joy. If you're with people that are really hard and not giving you the opportunities you deserve, that's a problem. That's a problem. But I always believe in speaking up, you know, in a respectful way, of course.
Sure. Thank you for that. I'm getting better and better at speaking up as well. And I think I think with as age,
you know, women are, we're trained to not speak up, but we have to speak up.
for sure.
Your generation is so much better than I was, that's for sure.
That's good to know. We're trying. So we have another question here. Can you please comment on late career leaders with transferable skills that have passions that you have spoken about?
Was this late career?
Yeah, sorry. Can you please comment on late career leaders with transferable skills that have passions that you have spoken about?
I think by late career, I think you mean older, like more seasoned leaders. Yeah, I mean, I think there are lots of skills. People who have lived for some time have so much lived experience that can be morphed into new and different things. Especially, I think one of my favorite things of Peace Corps actually was the intergenerational relationships. One of my favorite experiences was visiting Morocco and visiting Alice Carter, who was an 87-year-old Peace Corps volunteer. And she was paired with a guy whose name was Fabian, who was 22 from Brooklyn. And they were doing youth work together. And the things that were so amazing about them is that they were so in tune. And Alice would do, it was a youth development program, and Alice was teaching them poetry, and Fabian was taking them on hiking, but they would bring back flowers from their hikes, and then she would help them write poetry about it. And so they were just riffing off one another with their talents and their skills. I mean, part of it has to do with getting to know people well enough. Older people are ignored in our society. And I have had the privilege of knowing some amazing people who had unbelievable careers, and then they retire and, they're just another old person, when in fact they have so much to contribute in their life. So I actually think that we all owe it to ourselves, if nothing else, to get to know some of these extraordinary older people, because their stories are amazing, their wisdom is incredible, there's so much they can give, and it just takes getting to know them to be able to see where you can benefit.
Great. I interview for Peace Corps, and I always love interviews with the people that are in their 50s and 60s and 70s who want to serve, because I learned so much from them. And it almost doesn't feel like an interview, like a conversation, even though I am supposed to be doing my job.
Yeah, no, it's true. It's true. That's right, because you're in placement, so you're talking to these people. Yeah, no, they've got extraordinary things, and they may be very, one of the beauties of Peace Corps service is you might go in to be a teacher, an English teacher or something, but what you find out is that actually, you know how to do macrame, and you can help, women in your community start a small business of, making local products or something. I don't know.
Sure.
It's the most amazing part of your, we're all full people with lots and lots of skills and interests. And sometimes, actually, can I tell you one story?
Sure, go for it.
This is a story of a Peace Corps volunteer who then later became a Peace Corps country director, really great guy. And he had been a Peace Corps volunteer in Thailand. And I'm trying to remember what his original assignment was, but let's say he was a fish farmer. And so he went back to his site after like 40 years. And he was, his name was John Williams, actually is his name. And he went back to his site after 40 years, and he was terrified because he said, oh, they're not going to remember me, and I'm going to find out that everything I did was in vain, and I didn't, there was no impact in my community. And he's really just was terrified going back. And he went back, and he goes into the village, and it writes right there. The other thing I need to say is one of the things he had done, his parents had come while he was in, like halfway through. And they had taken him to a fancy restaurant. I think it was like the Oriental Hotel. And they had eaten some delicious watermelon while he was there. And so he had a little handful of watermelon seeds that he had taken back to his village after his parents had left. And he had started a small garden. That was like a secondary project with his little watermelon seeds. So anyway, he went back after 40 years later, and there's this old toothless guy sitting next to the shop when he walked into the village, and the guy looked up to him and he said, hey, John, it's been a while. How you been? You know, this guy had probably been 5 years older than him when he was a volunteer, but now they're both old guys, right? And he said, you know, to this man, he said, oh, I'm so happy you remember me. That really just brings me joy. And he said, well, I'm kind of wondering about my fish farms. Whatever happened to them? And he said, oh, your fish farms died. You know, 6 months after you're gone, they were gone, dried up, no good. And John's face just fell. And then the guy said, but your watermelons. And it turns out that his watermelons had become a huge hit, and it had become like the village crop. And they were now the watermelon capital of Thailand. And they were like selling watermelons to all the hotels across all of Thailand. So my point is, you never know what it is that you're going to bring to either to your relationship or your Peace Corps service or your job that is going to be the big, you know, it's going to be the difference. You can't predict.
Well, that's a great story. I really love that story. Of all your stories tonight have been really, really nice. Thank you, Carrie. I just want to invite everybody in the chat to give Carrie some kudos, or do your reaction signs, or however you want to express gratitude to Carrie. And then I'm going to throw it over to Jody.
Dan Baker, how nice. I'm seeing, you know, I was spotlighted on you before, but now I'm seeing all these wonderful friends on here.
Yeah, Carrie, take a moment and look. Carrie, I want to thank you. That, as I said, you're a mentor to me. And as I have been listening, it reminds me again, first about your humility, and that a leader must be humble. And with that, what I also took away this evening is your ability to give trust to others. That it takes a community, it takes others. Others have skills you don't have, but you give away the trust. And when you give away the trust, they give it back to you. And that's what builds the leadership itself. And you share the credit with everyone. You also, as you talked about and do so well, you help foster others. You find the best in other people, and you take the time to get to know them. So thank you. Thank you for your leadership, your mentorship.
It's so lovely to see all of you.
Us.
Yeah, and just to see all these names of people who I love so much and don't see very frequently anymore. But thank you all for your service, all of you. I mean, so many of you I know actually, and just appreciate and truly love. Actually, I have learned from all of you.
You're not forgotten. Finish this and you say what you do next.
It's so great to see you. I'm not going to start with names because there are too many to name, but those of you with whom I work know that I love you all so much.
Okay, I'm going to ask for one more minute before we go, but hugs, Carrie, hugs. This was fabulous.
Hugs to you all.
But for just a moment, I want to talk a little bit about Women of Peace Corps Legacy and our mission to advance women and girls' empowerment to be a better, more just, equitable, inclusive, and safe world for future generations. And you were hearing that in Carrie and her words tonight. You will see, I think Tristina is going to put it up, this how to sign up for Peace Corps. Peace Corps, you can tell I'm still so Peace Corps, sorry. This is terrible. Sign up for Women of Peace Corps Legacy, which you can do on the website. And what do you get when you become a Women of Peace Corps Legacy member? You get to continue in our programs featuring our monthly speakers, tonight being such a superb example of that. Our mentoring programs and our twice annual networking activities, our regular newsletters, and we give 2 awards each year, the Kate Rafferty Emerging Leader Award and the Deborah Harding Woman of Achievement Award. These are extraordinary ways to honor women like Carrie and others, hundreds of others, women who show leadership quietly and gently and with humility. We're asking for some donations to these 2 programs, And just to note, on the website, it shows how you can do it. And every match up through December 31st, up to $5,000 will be doubled by generous donors. So look towards that and look for how you too can even nominate someone for this coming year's awards. Thank you for being here tonight. Thank you, Carrie. Thank you, Marianne. We're here for each other across the generations, across the world, across the country. And it's what makes women strong, what makes women that community, and makes Women of Peace Corps legacy, hopefully the best we can be for all of you. Thank you tonight. And share each other here for a minute before we all are gone. But I love seeing you all. This is so wonderful. And Carrie and Marianne, you two were fabulous. Teresa, thank you for Tristina. Sorry,